Okay, so I am going to record this tutorial here just to sort of go over some of the basics of Zbrush, which is a really weird program, and I took ages to understand it, and I still don't really understand it that well, but I can use it well enough. And once you start to understand some of the weird concepts and the weird ways it works and why it works that way, hopefully you'll make some sense of it. I just fired up the latest version of 2020 because a friend of mine was going on about how he just did basically he kept having a nightmare with Zbrush, and I just basically just had some fun and spent about 10 minutes just like reacquainting myself with it, and ended up making this weird thing which is, it's amazing what you can do in ZBrush in just 10 minutes. This was just sculpted in dynamesh and then subdivided, and I've added a bit more sort of surface detail into it. Some sort of weird underwater sort of looking beastie, but obviously that's only a starting point. But what I want to do is show basically how you start in ZBrush, how you start straight away in 3D mode, because ZBrush is quite confusing. It was originally designed as a 2D sort of 2.5D painting package, and the 3D sculpting abilities were quite limited in the very first version. They were really designed to sort of basically create objects that then drop into this 2.5D canvas, and that divide is still present even in the current version of ZBrush, though obviously the focus of ZBrush nowadays is very much the 3D sculpting side. So I'm going to clear this whole document. Let's create a new document. Let's go new document, yes. And I'm not going to save any changes. In fact, right away here, we're going to see one of the first weird things about ZBrush, which is the difference between document and file. Document is actually creating a new 2.5D canvas rather than an actual 3D file, although you can obviously create 3D objects in this thing. When you're working with 3D objects and you want to save everything in your entire scene, not that ZBrush really has a scene concept, you use a file menu instead to save. So you can save off everything, including your 3D tools. If you just save the document, all you're going to save off is a 2.5D static image, effectively. So when you're working in 3D and sculpting stuff, always use the file menu to save rather than document. That's a beginner sort of mistake. When you first start up ZBrush, one really easy way to get things going is to go to the Lightbox. And this gives you a bunch of sort of starter projects. So often, if you want to create like a 3D object, some of the best ones to start with are these objects over here. You've got like, these are all 3D objects and you can start sculpting straight away. So if I say ZBrush sphere, dynamesh sphere in fact, let's try that one. So if you do this, it automatically creates a 3D object, and this is a really important part. It starts in edit mode. Now, if you haven't got edit mode selected, you're not actually going to be working in true 3D. Whenever you drop down an object, you have to basically straight away click edit mode. Otherwise, it will flatten it down to a 2.5D canvas. But this is actually a 3D object, and I can actually sort of rotate around it by clicking outside it and dragging. Here we go. And this is what's called a dynamesh sphere, which is a sort of voxelized way of sculpting in ZBrush. So you can, if you have the brush selected, simple brush, standard brush, and if you select your stroke type, so I'm going to do some dots, you can increase your Z intensity. You need to have Z added turned on. You can start sculpting in some stuff on here. Now the way dynamesh works is when you're sculpting, if your mesh starts to get too warped and really distorted, so if you really push this out, if I up the intensity, you'll see what this will show. If I really push this out, you can see the polygons are all getting a bit mangled. If you hold down the command key on a Mac, I don't know what it is on a PC, you can drag outside, it will update. It's a really weird way of working, but that's kind of part of the course of ZBrush. So you can sculpt and sculpt and sculpt until it gets all the polygons get horribly mangled, and then go whoop, and it kind of smooths it out. If you want to increase the resolution of the dynamesh, which you almost certainly will, as long as your computer's got enough memory and processing power, I normally take up to about 128, and that will, if I drag this again, No, it hasn't done it, but I'll just sculpt a bit more. Now it's done it. Okay, so now you can see it's voxelized it at a higher resolution. So we can do some more sculpting. Oh, this is looking much nicer. Sculpt our whatever thing it is, our weird, inevitably everything ends up looking like some weird alien head when you start playing around in Zbrush. Release outside, sculpt. Release outside, sculpt. So that's kind of updating it. And that's kind of it really. One of the really important things in Zbrush is to understand that you do most of your sculpting, you select tools using the brush menu here and the stroke menu, and then sometimes you'll use the alpha to set the sort of shape of the brush, the tip of the brush. So if, for example, I wanted to, well, if I wanted to sculpt any fine detail, I'll probably have to drop out of dynamesh mode now. So I'll do that right now, but I'm just going to sculpt some, no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to sculpt a bit more detail into this thing, so I'm going to make my brush size a bit bigger. I'm going to sculpt inside it a bit. Ooh, yeah, add some funny shapes. There we go. Oh yeah, that's good. Make some weird shapes. And then we'll make the brush size a bit smaller. And I'm going to just do some weird lumpy shapes all over it. So it's got a nice weird non-standard shape. And then I'm just going to click outside it and drag to update. There we go. And you can also use a smooth tool to smooth out all the weirdness as well a bit. That's cool. So just put that, there we go, add some more detail and then update. Yes, good. There's also a nice little feature in Dynamesh as well. You can actually get it to automatically polish. So after you, this can sometimes give you an overly stylized look, but if you do this, if I turn on the polish and then drag outside, sort of gives it that nice kind of smooth polished look, which may not be what you want. Normally I'd leave it turned off. The idea of Dynamesh is that you keep things looking pretty rough when you're working really, and then when once you're happy with it, if you undynamesh it, turn that off, and then go to the geometry tab and divide it maybe by once or twice. Once, maybe twice. Oh yeah. 1.17 million polygons. I love Zbrush for this sort of stuff. And then you can sculpt, and this obviously won't dynamically update anymore now because I've frozen it effectively. You can then though select, take down the Z intensity a bit, you can do sculpt a little bit of fine detail in. Z intensity, draw size down, I can sculpt fine detail in. That looks terrible. Let's make it a bit bigger and a bit bigger, and there we go. So if you want to add your little fine details now you can. And this is where you can start adding bit of texture maybe, sort of surface bumps and stuff. So I'm going to select my standard brush, good old standard brush, and I can probably use the drag rect. Drag rect is quite good, you just drag out shapes. I'm going to select some alphas from here, because these are all built-in ones. Obviously you can create your own in Photoshop or others. And I'm going to just draw some bumps on his surface. Oh, look at that, lumpiness, instant lumpiness. Ooh, and turn it and rotate it. So this is kind of how I create my amazing barnacle, terrible sea creature thing. It's just like, way, this is all groovy. Another question that was asked was about, by default, Zbrush has symmetry on, and symmetry is under maybe stroke. I can't remember tool. Maybe I don't know. It's somewhere in here. Transform, it's under transform. If you want to turn it off, just go to activate symmetry, turn it on and off. You can turn obviously different axes on. You can have X and Y and Z symmetry on as well. Most of the time when you're starting, you leave it on, of course. And this is obviously a nice sub-D thing, so you can drop down to lower subdivisions. And then of course when you finish sculpting all your high detailing, you can then export the whole thing out with a normal map for your 3D app to render beautifully. Oh, yeah, and you can use other tools too. But I mean, to be honest, you should really try and establish your basic geometry in the dynamesh mode, just to get the actual core shape. If you push this too far, it means that when you try and subdivide it, it will go funky. So just keep it like that. I don't know what else to really go over right now, but hopefully that gives you a good basic start in just working in 3D mode and doing a bit of basic sculpting in dynamesh. Comment if you want me to talk about anything else, but hopefully this makes some sense. But yeah, good luck in the wonderful weird world of Zbrush. Okay, good luck.